That morning, Ethan Monroe, founder of the renowned retail chain in Seattle, walked through the glass doors of the Sunrise Market branch, located in the heart of the city. The outfit he wore, a faded grey hoodie, worn-out jeans, and a low-brimmed baseball cap, ensured that no one would recognize the 55-year-old CEO, the very soul and hands behind the empire he had built from the ground up. Ethan brought no name tag, no entourage, only a speaker box in hand, an object that somehow felt heavier than the suitcases of accolades he had once carried. His steps were measured, his eyes scanning every detail of the store he had poured his passion into, from the shelves to the flickering promotional signs. Yet what he felt was not familiarity, but a quiet sense of distance, a chill of indifference radiating from those working inside. Just seconds after he entered, an elderly customer called out softly, hopeful for assistance. But her voice fell into silence as not a single employee looked up. Laughter rang out instead, from a back corner where 3 young employees huddled together, their carefree chatter peppered with jokes that would be unacceptable if directed at any customer. Another leaned against a shelf, eyes glued to a phone, smiling at something far removed from his current job. Ethan stood still, his right hand tightening around the speaker box, his left curled into a fist, as if to hold on to the last bit of patience left within him. The scene before him was not the store he once knew, but a place bearing his name that now felt foreign. In the past, Ethan had swept those floors, folded shirts on those very shelves, worked through the night restocking goods, and made it a point to greet customers by name. Not because he had to, but because he believed the important thing wasn't for people to remember his face, but how they were treated when they walked in. He once said, "Customers don't need to remember what I look like, as long as they remember how they were treated." That sense of respect had been the measure of his success, not sales figures or profit margins. He had personally trained every employee, teaching them to make eye contact, to ask instead of assume, to listen instead of dismiss. He believed kindness could spread and multiply if its foundation was solid. Now, surrounded by the bright signs and neatly arranged aisles, Ethan felt like a stranger wandering through his own home. The silence around him echoed louder than any insult. 5 years ago, this store had opened in warmth, not with grand parties or ribbon cuttings, but with Ethan stocking shelves, welcoming customers, and manning the register until closing time. He worked the floor each night, sleeves rolled up, voice calm, guiding new hires not just in how to sell, but how to truly see customers before they ever reached for a product. Back then, though exhausted, Ethan had never felt wealthier, not in money, but in meaning and humanity. But now, as he walked these same aisles, he couldn't help but wonder, where had that feeling gone? His heart sank as he realized that expansion to hundreds of locations and the growth into new cities with new teams had brought with it a widening disconnect. He no longer knew the names of every manager, no longer shook hands with each new hire. Then came the whispers, online comments, feedback slips folded and forgotten. Ethan read them all, missing none. They weren't complaints about pricing or product quality, but about people. Those cut the deepest, for they revealed a painful truth. The culture had begun to fracture, a company that grew but forgot why it started. And Ethan, a true leader, could not turn away. So he made a decision. One last time, he would enter his store not as a CEO, but as an anonymous customer. No chauffeur, no assistant, no announcement. Just a plain hoodie, worn-out shoes, and a single pressing question in his heart. Would the culture he built still exist when he was no longer present? He didn't come to check inventory, revenue, but to feel whether he would be ignored or welcomed, not because of title, but because of the choices of those around him. It may seem absurd, a millionaire disguised as a shopper, but that was the point. Real respect must reach everyone, not just those who sign paychecks. Ethan pulled the hoodie deeper over his face, the old canvas bag beside him frayed and its zipper broken. He once used it for receipts. Now it held nothing. He looked in the rearview mirror, and the man staring back wasn't a boss, wasn't a CEO, just a reflection shaped by time and quiet resolve. Ethan took a deep breath, bracing for a journey that might change everything. Ethan Monroe walked slowly along the familiar aisles, now cloaked in a cold and unfamiliar tone. Each step felt heavy, burdened by the realization that the store, once his brainchild, had transformed into a distant space where kindness and respect seemed to have been forgotten. His footsteps echoed against the cold tile floor, yet not a single glance or friendly smile was cast his way. Instead, a faint voice called out from the far side of the store, an elderly customer clearly in need of assistance. Ethan looked up and saw the hopeful eyes, but not a single employee responded. The customer called once, then twice, then a third time, only to be met with psalm and the sound of laughter echoing from a group of staff gathered at the end of the aisle. They huddled in a circle, their voices laced with crude jokes and mockery, one muttering profanities unfit for any workplace, let alone one in front of customers. A young man leaned against the shelf, eyes glued to his phone, a smirk playing across his face, entirely detached from the work he was supposed to do or the people around him. Ethan could feel it, the indifference etched into each face. This was no longer his store, no longer the place he had built with care and a belief in people. What remained were just outer shells, signs, logos, slogans, while the soul of the store had quietly begun to rot from within. He stopped, set the speaker box down, and clenched his left fist. The memories of those early days returned with piercing clarity, the days when he himself had swept the floors, folded each shirt, worked through the night to restock the shelves, and greeted every customer by name. He had once told his staff, "Customers don't need to remember my face. They only need to remember how I treated them." That was the standard he held above all else, far beyond revenue or profit. Ethan had personally trained every employee, teaching them to look customers in the eye, to ask instead of assume, and to listen rather than dismiss. He believed that kindness, when cultivated properly, could grow and spread. But now, as Ethan quietly passed each aisle, the blinking discount lights, once symbols of growth, had become hollow reminders of indifference and disconnect. Silence enveloped the space. No greetings, no eye contact. It was a change so profound and so difficult to accept that Ethan could not help but feel a deep sorrow as he faced the reality that the culture he had so painstakingly built was beginning to crumble day by day. Amid the cold and indifferent atmosphere that hung over the store, Ethan suddenly caught sight of something that eased his heart. if only slightly. Lena Harris, a young woman just 23 years old, worked with sincere eyes and a genuinely warm smile. Unlike her co-workers, Lena did not treat her responsibilities as just another task. She poured her heart into every small gesture. When an elderly gentleman stood uncertainly by the dress-shirt display, Lena didn't hesitate. She walked over, bent down gently, and offered a kind suggestion. "The blue one would look wonderful on you, sir." Her attentive care brought a smile to the man's face, the kind of quiet joy rarely seen in an environment that had begun to lose its warmth. Ethan stood silently, taking in the moment. He could feel a trace of life still pulsing through the store, even if it was just a flickering flame beneath a clouded sky. Lena wasn't trying to impress. She wasn't performing. Her kindness came from somewhere deep and honest. The softness in her voice, the way she treated every customer as if they were a beloved relative, offered Ethan a brief moment of healing. That single fleeting moment was enough to reignite the belief that the spirit of service hadn't been completely lost, that some still held on to the essential value of human decency. But that comfort was short-lived. When Ethan turned back toward the electronics aisle, reality reasserted itself. 3 employees still stood in a group, doing nothing but blasting music through a speaker and laughing loudly, disturbing nearby customers. They ignored glances, brushed off polite requests for help, and carried on with careless disregard. The air grew heavier, more stifling than before. The chill of indifference had become a sickness, spreading too widely to be cured with a few words of reminder. Lena remained where she was, a small beacon of light. But all around her, the broader picture revealed the painful truth of an organization losing its direction. In the cramped space of the store, laughter grew louder, no longer friendly but laced with biting sarcasm and cruel mockery. The 3 employees gathered by the electronics shelf seemed completely unconcerned with the customers needing assistance or the tense atmosphere they were contributing to. They had turned on a speaker not to showcase the product or assist shoppers, but simply to blast music at a volume that irritated everyone nearby. A woman pushing a stroller flinched and tried to steer away from the noise. Another customer stepped aside with a look of discomfort, but none of the employees offered an apology or lowered the volume. Their indifference stood like an invisible wall, separating customers from the respectful shopping experience they deserved. Ethan saw it all, every detail, every fleeting expression on the faces around him. Next to him, another employee leaned against a display, phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp and dripping with open contempt. "I told you," she sneered, "he looks like some broke loser." The words weren't whispered. They were said aloud, every syllable clear to Ethan's ears. She didn't see him, or perhaps pretended not to. But it didn't matter. Her attitude wouldn't have changed either way. It wasn't just what she said. It was the reduction of a human being's worth based solely on appearance, clothing, and presence. In that moment, Ethan didn't just feel insulted. What he felt was something deeper, heavier than anger. It was the weight of isolation, the pain of being stripped of the basic dignity every person is entitled to. The employees here weren't just unprofessional. They carried a quiet prejudice, a hidden bias that turned disrespect into a daily routine. The space descended into chaos in ways no one expected. Jokes turned into vulgar insults, demeaning comments about others became a twisted form of entertainment. One of the employees, the youngest in the group, made a crude remark about a female customer who had just walked in, right in front of Ethan, as if no one else could hear. "What a waste of a body on someone so dumb," he said with a sneer. The group burst into laughter, slapping each other's backs as if it were all part of the day's fun. Ethan felt his chest tighten with disappointment and pain. A sorrow that had been quietly building now stabbed at his faith in the culture and people he once believed in. In the midst of that noise, apathy spread like a disease. It not only made customers feel abandoned, but slowly crushed the spirit of those still trying to do good. Ethan saw the weary eyes of a few other employees. They weren't laughing, but they weren't speaking up either. They seemed trapped in a system where indifference and disrespect had become normalized, where silence was survival. And yet all was not lost. Ethan remembered Lena, the one who had shown him a flicker of kindness and hope. But now, standing beside that light, was a harsh reflection of the organization's darker side. A place where prejudice and bias were no longer whispered, but openly voiced, as if they were harmless jokes, with no one held accountable. That pain only fueled Ethan's resolve. He hadn't come here for pleasantries or flattery. He came to face the truth, however bitter. Indifference, discrimination, and contempt could never be the norm in a company built around people. This was the moment for change, the moment for him, as its leader, to speak out and take action. Amid the careless laughter and the spreading apathy, Ethan suddenly caught sight of something entirely different, like a spark of light in a sea of darkness. At the checkout counter stood Susan Collins, a middle-aged cashier with silver strands in her hair and a kind, gentle gaze. As Ethan approached, she looked up with warmth in her eyes and offered a soft, genuine smile. "Did you find everything you needed, sir?" she asked, a simple question, but one filled with true care. Ethan paused, moved by that simple act of kindness. The contrast between her and the other employees felt like two separate worlds. He didn't respond with words, only nodded in quiet gratitude, knowing that some things cannot be expressed verbally. In that brief moment, the weight on his shoulders lightened just enough, yet it also reminded him that genuine kindness wasn't rare. It was just something easily forgotten in the hustle of work and the fog of indifference. He set the speaker box on the counter, pulled out his phone, and called the regional manager. His voice was calm but unwavering. "I need to speak with branch manager Mark Benson immediately." That call was not just a request, it was a wake-up alarm for the entire system, a signal that something vital was bleeding inside the organization. Not numbers or charts, but the soul of the company, the respect for people, and the kindness embedded in every small gesture. Less than an hour later, Ethan returned to the store, no longer disguised as a customer, but standing in full presence as the true owner, the man who had seen and heard everything. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Eyes darted toward him, laughter ceased, banter dissolved into tense silence. Branch manager Mark Benson appeared with a strained expression, trying to maintain a professional facade, but unable to mask the anxiety of recognizing the man before him as the head of the entire company. Ethan looked him straight in the eye, without pleading, without fury, only clarity and firmness in every word. "I've spent over an hour here, watching, listening, witnessing things that deeply troubled me. His gaze swept over every face, every aisle, every corner of the store, places where respect and decency should have been evident. This is the store I once swept with my own hands, folded every shirt with pride and dedication, and today I watched it be disgraced by those who've forgotten why this place was built. No one spoke. No one tried to explain, because they all knew his words were true and indisputable. A few employees averted their eyes, hoping to fade into the background, but Ethan said nothing more, allowing the silence to demand accountability. In the end, that silence carried more weight than any reprimand. The 3 employees who had mocked customers, ignored the elderly, and displayed open disrespect were terminated on the spot, a decisive act that made it clear negligence would not be tolerated. Ethan didn't raise his voice or act out in anger. He stood with the authority of someone who had seen what must be rejected and was ready to cleanse his organization, to revive its soul. When you choose to ignore customers, mock them, and treat them with contempt, you are not worthy of wearing this uniform, he said, his voice calm but sharp as steel. This uniform is not just for show. It stands for responsibility. And if that responsibility means nothing to you, take it off right now. No further explanation was needed. Heads bowed. The tension in the room became heavy, but it was also charged with meaning. Ethan had offered them a chance to change, but he also made the consequences clear for those who refused. Leadership, he proved, is not about preaching with words, but acting with presence, with honesty, and with justice. The tension in the small store meeting room still lingered, but Ethan Monroe didn't need to raise his voice or make a scene to convey his message. His steady presence alone rendered all unnecessary words obsolete. He began a candid conversation, not to scold, but to awaken a culture that was slowly decaying, causing both customers and employees to lose the genuine connection that once existed. "Silence is not innocence," Ethan said, his tone calm but resolute. "It is complicity. When you choose to look away from disrespect, discrimination, or apathy, you are contributing to the downfall of this organization." His words echoed through the room, engraving themselves into the minds of every employee present. One of them, a long-time staff member with a face full of remorse, spoke in a trembling voice. I just didn't know what to say. I saw it was wrong, but I was afraid of the consequences." Ethan turned to that person with eyes filled with both understanding and firmness. "Saying nothing is still a choice, and that choice has consequences. If you cannot stand up for what is right, how can this organization remain standing? Culture isn't built by policies or training manuals alone. It is shaped by each action, each thought, each day." Ethan paused, allowing the room to settle, giving everyone a moment to absorb the weight of his words. He wasn't asking for perfection, only that each individual remember why they took this job in the first place, why they chose to wear that uniform, not to perform or assert power, but to preserve and spread respect, kindness, and compassion. "The logo on your chest," he said, pointing to the uniform. "That's not a decorative emblem. It's a promise, a responsibility you carry. If you cannot understand and honor that, you do not belong here. Leaving today is not a punishment. It's how we preserve the integrity and dignity of this organization." The atmosphere grew heavy, but also clearer, like a rainstorm washing away layers of dust from the store's forgotten values. Ethan didn't use harsh words or sarcasm, because he knew true change only comes when hearts are open, not from fear, but from voluntary awareness. He continued, "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to remember who you are and who you serve. You're not serving numbers on a report. You're serving people, stories, souls who walk into this store every day, hoping to feel respected and genuinely cared for." Ethan Monroe delivered a clear message to the entire team. Leadership isn't about titles or absolute power. It's about accountability, compassion, and being fully present in every moment. To lead is to confront the truth, to embrace change, and to take responsibility for the culture one creates. When he finished, no one in the room said a word. They knew those words weren't just a warning. They were a wake-up call, a map guiding the way toward the store's rebirth. That silence now held more meaning than any spoken reply. It was the unspoken commitment of people standing at a crossroads, to continue down the old path, or to rebuild together from the most fundamental values. After the stern meeting, Ethan Monroe didn't rush to leave. Instead, he took time to observe the renewed atmosphere gradually spreading throughout the store. What satisfied him was not empty promises or grand plans, but the genuine transformation in attitude and actions of each employee, no matter how small. A cashier slowly greeted customers as they entered. A sales associate enthusiastically assisted an elderly shopper. Light laughter and attentive eyes replaced the indifference that once lingered. Ethan understood that cultural change could not happen overnight, nor could it begin with lengthy lectures or strict rules. It had to start from the simple, the familiar. A warm greeting, a listening gaze, a small gesture of help. These seemingly insignificant acts are what create a profound difference in customer experience, while also reinforcing the morale of the team. He noted each moment with care, knowing these were the early signs of a true revival in the store's service culture. A young man who once idled in gossip was now focused, meticulously organizing the merchandise. A newly hired employee, once hesitant to meet a customer's eyes, now proactively inquired about their needs and listened attentively. These small changes reflected clear progress, like bricks laid to rebuild a strong foundation. Ethan also did not forget to thank and praise individuals like Lena Harris and Susan Collins, rare beacons of integrity in what was once a shadowed environment. He offered them sincere encouragement and urged them to become sources of inspiration for their colleagues, helping to foster a work community rooted in respect and solidarity. But more importantly, Ethan recognized that responsibility did not rest solely on the shoulders of a few outstanding individuals. It belonged to everyone. Each person had a role and a duty to uphold kindness, respect, and a spirit of service. That's why he decided to send a powerful message across the company's internal network, a letter addressed to every department, every store, every employee, with a clear statement. Service culture is a shared responsibility, not an individual one. Every action, no matter how small, either builds or erodes our image. Remember, customers don't just pay for products. They pay for the experience, for the respect, and the sincerity we give. Ethan's message quickly spread, becoming a topic of discussion in break rooms, in small meetings, and even in casual conversations among staff. People began to reflect on themselves, realizing the importance of attitude and behavior in their daily work. Slowly, day by day, positive changes were noted. Customers were served more attentively, favorable feedback increased, and internal cohesion began to strengthen. Ethan needed no microphone, no grand stage. He only needed his presence, his unannounced steps, and the changing expressions on people's faces. His silence that day, a silence full of weight, echoed through hallways, meeting rooms, and even within internal group chats. Everyone understood. It was not fear of being watched that prompted change, but the awakening to the true value of respect and kindness. Simple acts like greeting a customer, listening to a complaint, or helping an elderly person find an item were no longer seen as burdens, but as sources of joy, as expressions of a culture that had been reignited. Ethan Monroe had proven that the power of leadership lies not in authority, but in empathy, in authentic presence, and in the ability to inspire through the most ordinary of actions. Ethan Monroe left the store not with complete satisfaction, but with a calm determination. He knew the journey to revive the service culture would be long, filled with challenges ahead. But what mattered was that the flame had been reignited. The flame of respect, kindness, and sincerity embedded in even the smallest of actions. He realized that the true power of respect does not lie in lofty titles, eye-catching uniforms, or grand declarations. That power lives in the simplest gestures, a shared glance, a sincere question, a timely smile. These are the seemingly small seeds that carry powerful life force, capable of spreading and transforming an entire organization, an entire community. Ethan understood that every employee, regardless of position, is a builder of corporate culture. They choose how to treat customers and colleagues each day, and those choices shape the company's true identity. Power and titles are not required. Anyone can nurture or extinguish kindness within the workplace. He extended his gratitude to those who dared to stand up, who dared to speak, who dared to act, even if silently in the background. People like Lena Harris, like Susan Collins, like himself when he returned to the store in disguise, to listen, to observe, to understand. Because leadership is not just about controlling everything from above. It is also about quiet presence, about the strength in actions that speak without words. Ethan didn't need a performance, didn't need drums or fanfare. His silence that day, the unannounced footsteps, the steady gaze, the calm voice, became a powerful wave of change, echoing through every hallway, every meeting room, flowing through conversations and into the reflections of each individual. His presence was a silent strike, but strong enough to awaken those who had fallen asleep in the comfort of indifference. He ended his story with a message both gentle and profound. Respect is not a service to be exchanged. It is a standard to be preserved. Remember, you do not need a title or authority to open a door, to offer a glance, or to care for another person. Every small act can make a big difference. That message was not only for the staff in the store, but for everyone listening to this story. Because each of us has a choice, to watch things unfold or to dare to do something about them. And that choice will define the face of the community, of the society we live in. Ethan Monroe, having walked a path filled with emotion, stood in front of the store, the place that had once been his pride, and looked up at the sign bearing his name. Sunlight streamed through the glass windows, casting the shadow of a company slowly being brought back to life. He didn't look back, because he knew change had already begun, and the journey ahead, though long, was now filled with hope. The story of Ethan Monroe is not just a lesson in cultural transformation within a company. It is also a powerful testament to the strength of respect and kindness in any workplace. A truly sustainable organization is not built solely on revenue or procedures, but most importantly, on how people treat one another each and every day. When a leader has the courage to face the truth and act with unwavering conviction, a positive culture is reignited, and that in turn inspires the entire team to grow together. If you found this story valuable and inspiring, please like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the meaningful videos to come. And don't hesitate to leave a comment with the phrase "respect" if you too believe in the power of kindness and fairness in life. Thank you for being here and for listening.